It doesn't take a genius to know that inflation has been a hot topic over the last year or so. On YouTube alone, there seems to be two camps. There are the Meet Kevins or the Cathie Wood supporters who believe that inflation is transitory, that it's entirely due to supply side shocks, and that before long it will all disappear, so there's no need to worry. Most people call them bulls, but my word of choice for them wouldn't be so kind. Then there are the skeptics, those who think that increasing the money supply by 30% within a year will cause inflation. Those who think that supply side shocks do not tell the entire story and that no, these higher prices are not going to go back down just because the Fed says they're transitory. I think it's probably quite clear what side of the fence I stand. Many of you will call me a perma-bear, but quite frankly, that's just a little bit stupid. It makes no sense to call me a perma-bear when the data is on my side, when every month there are new stories about how costs and prices are rising and there seems to be no respite. Then there's Michael Burry, who is infamous enough as it is. You know who he is, I know who he is, we all know who he is, so you'll have to forgive me if I can't be bothered to spend another 2 minutes of mine and your time explaining his backstory. If you need your memory jogging, then I've got a bunch of other videos out there where I explain who he is and why we listen to him, or you can just Google him. Now, Burry is obviously not a fan of the recent actions by the Fed, and he's especially not a fan of the results of the Fed's actions. Inflation is high right now, and while some people are trying to make out that 5% consumer price index inflation is fine, normal, and not a big deal, Burry obviously isn't one of those people. Most recently, he took to Twitter once more and shed some light on not only the problems that high inflation is causing, but also the Fed's manipulation of the data, which helps them pretend that these problems don't exist. Today, we're going to look over what Burry had to say and try to establish why the Fed is doing what they're doing. But really quickly, if you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe. If you want to help the channel grow and ensure we can continue to make content like this, then consider helping us out through our brand new Patreon. Link is down below in the description. So Burry tweeted out, regarding inflation, so at Federal Reserve, are you lying to us or are you lying to us? And along with that tweet, Burry linked an article by the Wall Street Journal and a picture from that article that reads as follows. Mr. Powell used a gauge from the Dallas Fed that throws out the top 31% and bottom 24% of personal consumption expenditure (PCE) price changes, and was bang on the Fed's 2% year-over-year target in July, the latest available. An alternative measure from the Cleveland Fed strips out the bottom and top 16% of consumer price index changes and was far higher, worse. The monthly rate was unchanged in August from July, giving no support to the idea that inflation is already coming back down. So what Burry and this article are claiming is that the Fed is manipulating the inflation data to make it seem better than it is. And to be honest, it's hard to argue against Burry here. But in the interest of full transparency, I'll do my best to explain what the Fed's argument is. In the past, when people have been trying to measure inflation, they have tended to use the CPI or Consumer Price Index or a measure very similar to it, as it tries to measure how much things that people actually buy cost. Some people like to think of it as a basket of goods where you try and work out what most people or households spend most of their money on. Bread is a staple of almost everyone's diet and almost every household buys it every week, so it is heavily weighted in the CPI. Jet skis, on the other hand, are less common and fewer people buy them, so they are less heavily weighted. In general, when people think inflation, they think CPI. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that it's a perfect measure of inflation. It doesn't, for instance, measure asset prices particularly well, which means a housing bubble can rise and fall without really affecting it all that much. The Fed, however, don't like CPI. They like PCE, or personal consumption expenditures, and their reasoning is that they want to measure inflation caused by their activities, quantitative easing or money printing. And as PCE pays more attention to business costs than the CPI, they feel it's a better fit. Now, in general, PCE is almost always lower than CPI. So for a Fed with a very loose monetary policy, who is trying to justify their loose monetary policy, PCE is always going to be the favoured metric. But look, if it were that alone, then fine. Maybe we wouldn't be saying that the Fed are manipulating the data, but the next part throws that right out of the window. You see, the Fed are removing the top 31% of PCE price changes and the bottom 24% as they claim those price increases are due to supply-side shocks, not their monetary policy. Obviously, there are two problems with this. If they wanted to differentiate between supply-side or demand-driven inflation, then why do they adopt a top and bottom approach? Why not look at each measure independently to try and establish what has caused the price changes? A general non-differentiation approach like this doesn't make any sense. The second obvious problem is that they are removing more of the high inflation than they are the low inflation. Why remove 31% of the highest inflationary measures while only 24% of the lowest? I'm sorry, but here there isn't any justification for this. It's data manipulation and nothing else. The Fed are basically saying, well, yes, the inflation numbers are high, but if you remove the highest inflationary data points from your measures, then there actually hasn't been any real inflation. This is proven by the fact that Cleveland's Fed, which uses a far better measure of inflation, have said that no, inflation is still here, it's still high, and in fact, it hasn't fallen at all since August. Again, it's very difficult to argue against Burry's point here, and the simple truth is, he's right. The Fed is lying about inflation. To those who still believe what the Fed have to say, I can only ask you why. Why do you continue to put your faith in an institution that is so blatantly lying to you? Why rely on someone who, when the data doesn't fit their narrative, they simply change the data? An old adage comes to mind, statistics don't lie, but liars use statistics. Burry did have some other things to say about inflation as well, but I'm afraid nothing quite as poignant. He posted another article which shows that fears of inflation are rising, that people are starting to think past the statements made by the Fed, and that the 10-year Treasury yield has finally broken through a key resistance which should allow it more room to rise. He also pointed out that ESG, or basically just eco-friendly or green initiatives like renewable energy, are inherently inflationary, and we're already starting to see that take place. Here in the UK, gas and electricity prices are about to rise 12% for 12 million households. Wages for truck drivers are soaring as there is a strong lack of supply of labour right now. Global shipping costs have been rising every week for a year, breaking all previous records. Oil prices are up to pretty incredible levels, especially if you're a fan of Cathie Wood, who infamously said just a few months ago that oil prices are on their way down to $12 a barrel. And now that they're actually rising, she's rushing in again to blame supply side effects. Now I know that some of you will say something along the lines of, it's all about where the inflation comes from, that's all that matters, but the truth is, I don't care whether inflation is demand driven or supply side shocks. I do not care because it doesn't matter. Prices are higher and they keep getting higher. I've listened to the arguments of Cathie Wood and I've listened to the arguments from Michael Burry. They both sound plausible, but one side has empirical data and evidence behind them. The other has nice sounding buzzwords and promises of a utopian future. Ultimately, inflation is not transitory, no matter what anyone says, until prices fall again. You'll notice that the Fed has already changed their definition of transitory, because if they aren't proven correct by the truth, they will simply change the truth. Go back a year and transitory meant prices would fall back down. Things like, oh, shipping is expensive right now, but give it a few months and it will be back down to normal levels. Well, even the Fed are now admitting that that's not going to happen. Prices will not go back down and everyone knows it. The claim now is that prices will stop going up and that will count as transitory inflation, but the data is starting to look rather gloomy on that front as well. I want to thank those that have joined my Patreon. I've just set it up this week and I'm hoping that it gives me more financial security and allows me to continue making this kind of content. So if you like these videos and you want to help support the channel, then the link is down below in the description. If you remember just a couple weeks ago, I almost had my channel deleted by YouTube, and this is one of the things that I promised I would have set up so that they can't threaten me like this again. You can help support the channel for as little as $1 a month. You get access to loads of extra stuff that isn't here on YouTube, and once I reach 100 patrons, I'm going to hire a video editor to help me get out more content every week for you. If you're new to the channel and you enjoyed this video, then make sure to subscribe. If you want to help spread the word, then consider liking this video and leaving a comment, and YouTube will do its part by pushing this video out to more people just like you. I really do appreciate all the support you give the channel, even if it's just leaving a like. There are also links to my other channels, Stoic Economy and Stoic Crypto, down below in the description that you can check out as well. In the description, there's also a link to my favorite brokerage called eToro, where you can trade stocks and shares, crypto, commodities, foreign currencies, and more, all for 0% commission. And there's also a link in the description to BLOCKFI, where you can get up to $250 in free Bitcoin, and you can earn interest on whatever crypto you hold, whether it's Bitcoin, Ether, or stablecoins. You could earn as much as 14% interest per year. Thanks for all the support recently. Thanks for watching. Until next time.